Why would you outsourced to Virginia?
They're an excellent agency that's doing really good work. And they bid on the project. That's what you do in marketing. If something comes up, it's a request for proposals. You put together a proposal, and they did, and they got it. This was well before my time. I don't really know any of the backstory about that. That was about 5 years ago. So they've been doing it for a while. This is not a new thing. So, yeah, I just joined the team like 2 months ago. Yeah.
How do you like it?
It's great. I'm learning a ton about Eureka because I live in Arcata. I'm new to the country and to the area. Everything feels very new. And so I've been kind of like dancing around being here, I feel like. Like I ran a production company in Canada for 5 years and was still doing that when I moved out here. And so I was kind of just like sitting in my office working. Like I wasn't really here. And just in the last 6 months, I've been like, okay, like I live here now. And then getting this job and being in the community a little bit more and just even like commuting to Eureka to work and stuff. Like I'm like, okay, now I live here and now I'm able to actually like really meet people, you know, and teaching at the university and stuff. So it's like, it's been a really slow burn, I feel like. I don't know how other newcomers feel about this place, but it's like, I have had to spend a really long time kind of just like slowly figuring it out.
Do you think that's the adjustment to the States or the adjustment to the area specifically?
I think both. I mean, it's a rural place too. Like the city I'm from is like 1.5 million people.
Yeah, so slight difference in population size.
Yeah. But this is like totally what I want. Like I want to be here. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. But there's like, when I tell my friends in Canada about this place, I'm like, so I live right beside the forest too in Arcata, and I'll often think that there are forces at play in the woods. We kind of all know this, but these are not benevolent forces. Like there's a darkness to this place in a way that I don't think is like, you know, something to be that scared of, but it's something to really like listen to. Like I feel kind of halted being here in a way by the natural world.
In a dark sense.
In a dark sense, but not like an evil sense. And I think that's just like life in general. Like there's darkness to it that we need to like embrace and not be afraid of. And I think that here that gets boiled to the surface a little bit because the natural world is just like there in your face. I don't know. Do you feel like that living here?
I mean, certain times, if you go downtown at 11 o'clock, you could say, yeah, okay, it feels like there's some dark energy, but I don't know about as a whole. But I was born and raised here, so I might just be too
I'm not
ingrained
talking about
in
the
it.
people. I mean, I think the people are
the
affected
area.
by it, but I'm talking about like walking into the forest for like several hours and just like being with it and realizing that the natural world is not this like sweet kind thing.
Oh,
And
you're talking about the dichotomy between the forest and like the city here?
Just no, like as a human being like affected by the natural world, like the forest here, I think is really profound. And I think it's really easy to be like, oh, wow, it's so beautiful. Like, let me just like Instagram some fog. Like, that's great. But
Which a lot of people do.
Yeah. And I think that, yes. And there is a darkness that must be heard here, I think. I don't know.
Huh. I wouldn't describe it as dark, but I've spent just a lot of time in the woods. Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting perspective.
I think that
Do you feel like you're tapped into kind of that more so than other people?
No, I don't. And I think that that's why I like being here because I'm sort of forced to sit with it a little bit more, which is funny because I came in here being like, oh my God, I'm so busy. Like everything is crazy. I have this new job. So it's almost like if you're in a city, you're not contending with the outside world as much. You're in a city, you do your job, you go home, whatever. And here you're expected, at least like the lifestyle I am living, I am now expecting myself to live that way, but then also be constantly faced with this like insane beauty, you know, speaking to me and being like, you know, we're just right here. Like, you know, it's sort of, it makes you feel kind of like paled in comparison to it, and that all of this is just kind of a joke, and like the trees are the thing that matters. I don't know.
That I do get. That idea of when you're in nature, it kind of gives you this healthy perspective of, okay, everything else doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like your job, the stress of, oh, I've got all these big projects piling up, I've got all this work to do, it kind of fades away. Especially when you're, at least for me, if you're out in the forest at night or like sunrise, I think that really hits home. And you can sit there and say, okay, you get a little perspective. It's like taking a breath.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, there are things that matter more than what I'm worrying about right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, I think, being here and trying to be like a working professional, it's like this tension that I'm constantly dealing with of like, no, run away, go into the forest and never come back. And then be like, no, like have a career and like, you know, survive financially. So
Was it easier to just keep your head down and kind of focus on the career in the city?
Yes,
Because you're
yes.
you're surrounded by people who are just working.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. So that's a big adjustment being out here.
A big adjustment in a good way for you? Is that kind of what you wanted? Was that?
Yeah, I think that ideally, like, I think that wage labor is kind of ridiculous, and I would love to just fade into the forest at some point, but that's not happening right now. So, yeah. I think everyone's just doing a dance, you know, to try to figure it out. You know, we need to get by, but we also need to just be human beings. So
That's the struggle, is how much can I do to get by versus what do you actually want to do? Do you want to work this job that you're
Yep.
working? Do you want to be this stressed out? But the flip side of that is you don't want to be homeless. It's like, okay, let me just keep working.
and in this economy,
Right now specifically?
like, yeah, like it's hard. You know, I think that, and you know, folks like 40 and under, it's like you kind of just have to grind at the moment. And again, it just feels kind of like ridiculous in a place like this to have to push so hard. But I do also believe that things ebb and flow. Like I was in like the most chill place I've ever been in really in my life, like over the summer. And then I've just started like working on more projects and gotten busier. So waiting for the thing to
Mellow out
ebb.
again.
Yes.
It's interesting hearing you say that because I would assume film production would just be go, go, go all
Oh,
the
no.
time.
No, like it, so if we want to get into the film side of my life, I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about the industry, and it kind of does branch off to what I'd just been talking about. I think that there's definite like pauses and then ramping up. So of course you've got your like development and your pre-production, and then you've got your shooting, and then you've got kind of like a lull, and then you go into post-production, and then it's like a lot of these like peaks and valleys. And those can last for like over 2 years at least, sometimes with a feature film. And so you really have to be okay with things like slowing down almost to a halt sometimes. Like say you're waiting on a loan, say you're like applying for a grant and you're just like not sure if you're gonna get it or not. You're waiting to hear back from talent, and there's like 5 people between you and that talent that have to come into play for you to actually get an answer for something. Like you really have to learn how to like go and then hold and wait and then go again. So it's a very like this industry is like very kind of like manic in that way. And as a producer that has been working now, not for that long. I mean, I only got into film after completing a master's degree, and I was well into my 30s. Even just taking it seriously and working in that industry just for like 5 or 6 years, I see so many issues with it from kind of like a, you know, well-being perspective. And I really feel for people that do go all the way with it, you know, like I'm going to LA, like this is it, like very kind of like that staunch industry approach to filmmaking, because it will tear you to pieces physically and mentally. And I'm at a point in my career where I could do that or I could pull back, and I'm at a point where I'm pulling back. Not to say I'm not making films anymore, but I really am conscious of the fact that there's like just so many problems with this industry. Yeah.
the problems being that ebb and flow, or is it something?
Well,
What is it for you?
I
What?
think for me it stems from a lack of oversight for producers mostly. I think that, as we know, actors are quite protected with the unions, and it depends on like where you're working. Like, there's a lot of different factors at play for this. I don't want to be too generalist about it, but like I do think there's just like treatment of crew and treatment of other producers, directors. Like there's just like very bad like behavior in the industry, and you really, really, really have to be a good person despite all of that. You know, like I think that again, I don't want to generalize everybody in the industry, but you can get away with a whole lot of big asshole stuff, and some people buy into it and think that the only way that they're going to succeed is to just be a huge asshole, and then some people go another route. And I'm just trying to figure out where I want to be in that world, and if I want to be in that world. And at the moment, the direction that I'm going as a filmmaker is more into small scale documentaries and more like community led projects. And being new to Humble is an opportunity for me to really kind of like sit and take things in here, really like stop and listen and get a sort of temperature check on this place, and sort of wait for stories to come to me and wait for people to come to me that like have interesting things to share and want to work and collaborate. I think going into the documentary space for me is really an exercise in knowing where your place is and knowing when you can step in to support, and identifying like who has the right and the agency to tell certain stories. If that makes sense.
So for you, it almost seems like there's this air of a toxic workplace that kind of was upsetting. Which that's what you hear about a lot, especially with Hollywood, is it's
Yeah, and
not
I think
the
that
best.
there's a lot of like mismanagement of money and people that just, I think everyone's kind of running around like really freaked out because it's super stressful. And so then their way of coping with it is kind of just not being great. Not to mention, you know, working on larger scale, like especially like narrative fiction features. And I should be clear, I'm an independent filmmaker. Like I work with tiny budgets, but even the opportunities that I have to work with something like slightly higher, like closer to $1 million, it's like very intense and scary being responsible for a lot of money. So like me as an independent having that kind of like understanding, I can't imagine, you know, people being responsible for like, you know, dozens of millions on things. Like I get it, like why it's so tough. But I think I'm just like not interested in the chaos at the moment.
Was that part of the decision to come down here? Was you had kind of reached this point where you felt like you needed to make a decision where you wanted to go?
No, coming down here was like a totally random thing for me. So I met my husband, who is also from Canada, and he was in town for the summer up in Calgary. This is where I'm from. And we met and we were long distance because he came back down here. He teaches at Cal Poly Humboldt in the art department. And I kind of thought, okay, whatever, nothing's gonna, like, this is long distance. It'll probably just like fizzle out. But then we ended up like coming back and forth and visiting each other. And then COVID hit. And then it was sort of like, okay, maybe I'll just come for like a while. And then I moved here. And then we got married because I needed to get a green card in order to stay. So it all moved like very quickly. And I came in just being like, oh, California. There's palm tree. I went on like Google Street View to like the plaza in Arcata, and I was like, there's palm trees there. It's probably like hot and nice, like whatever, it'll be great. And I show up and it was like, okay, this isn't SoCal. This, and my friends, they're like, oh, so you moved to LA. Like they really, in Canada, we don't realize how big California is. And so it's like, oh yeah, you moved to LA to like, people think I moved to LA to work in the film industry. And it's like, no.
You're like, I'm a few hours north.
Yeah, like, thank you for your interest. But no, like people coming to me wanting to collaborate on things in Canada because they think I'm like
big time now.
Yeah, it's like, no.
You're like, lower your
actually the
expectations a
opposite.
little bit.
But again, I think that because we are working in this place that's outside of all of that chatter in Hollywood, there's so much potential here in Humboldt for filmmakers. And I think, like, yes, of course, there's boundaries, you know, access to gear, access to crews. But we have so much opportunity to tell stories that are so unique to this place. And I think there's just like a whole lot that can be done. And I'm curious too, because you, when we spoke before, you said you had an interest in filmmaking, and I know you've interviewed a couple other filmmakers recently. Like, is this something that's kind of like percolating for you to be getting into, or what's
Yeah. I don't know to what extent. I've always been interested in the acting side, but lately, or not even lately, for a while I've also been interested in almost writing something, but I'm so focused on this now. That's almost a back burner idea, but it's something I keep kicking around. I had Justin, I'm drawing a blank on his last name, but he is a videographer and director here locally, and he has produced some pretty insane work. You guys, I don't know if he would reach out or not, but you guys might do something. There's definitely a ton of creative people in that field up here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, we're almost landlocked in that way where there's not a whole lot of movement. As opposed to if you were down in LA, you could be doing something every week.
Well, it depends. It completely, and I think it's very easy to talk about the film industry as like the industry, you know, and it is so complex. And I think if you're interested in being like a crew member, yeah, Humboldt is tough. If you're interested in starting something yourself and knowing that we don't just exist in a little bubble here, and knowing that, like, yeah, you have to reach out to other producers to like collaborate with you and maybe elevate your work that are outside of the area, or really do deep research into like the funding available. And this is something, as a Canadian, I'm always like, where's all the grant money? Because like we get all the grant money there, but there is, like, the more that I dig here, the more I'm like, okay, there's like these foundations, there's these funds, like it's just not as like government focused as it is up there. But I do think, yeah, I think you can really do something incredible here for sure. And you think of people like, oh my gosh, I was just talking about her yesterday. There's a female filmmaker, Southern Oregon, First Cow and Old Joy she directed, and it is like so deeply Pacific Northwest. Like, it is just like you really feel it watching her films. And I think that Humboldt has such a potential there too as like a location, you know. But this idea that like to be a filmmaker, you gotta get your crew of like 30 people plus, you gotta have the best this, the best that this whole like that very like mainstream idea of filmmaking, I think is like completely prohibitive to so many people that have talent, and it's something that people just get so freaked out by that they don't do it. I mean, what, like Tangerine was filmed just on like a cellular telephone, and it was one of the most phenomenal movies I've seen in like a decade. So you gotta just do it.
I think that's the moral of the story for life. Whatever you're trying to pursue, you have to just start doing it and then let the pieces fall into place as you go, instead of trying to get everything lined up to be perfect when you start.
And following through, like, you know, you can sit down and paint a painting in like a couple hours, and it's like you have this tangible thing and be like, great, I did that, done. Like, making a film is so arduous in terms of time. Like, you come up with an idea, this like spark of an idea, it could take you like 8 years to finish that. And that will mean that you probably hate your idea after a certain point. You realize how much money it takes to make this happen. You have to work with people that you might not click with. There's just so many things that are going to get into your way. So you hear a lot of stories. People will be like, oh yeah, like you're saying, I'm going to write something. It's like, great, you're going to write something. And then
20 years go by.
20 years go by, and like, you know, you don't know what to do with it. Like, it's so many little pieces coming together. And I think that emerging filmmakers really need to have mentors, and I think that having mentors is extremely hard because the people that actually do like make it in whatever sense you think of it are pretty hard to reach. But that there's such a disconnect between being like, I'm gonna write a script and like having a vision of it coming to life, and they do, like, it happens a lot. It's just extremely complicated, and you need to know the right people in order to move it along, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I think like it's just so easy to be like, I'm not going to do this anymore, I need to put it on the back burner or something because it's totally overwhelming. But just the people that rise to the top are just super stubborn is what I think.
Well, and they're the ones that actually take the step, right? Instead of just saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, or I'm thinking about how to do this. And then you check back in a little while later and they're still thinking about how to do it. Yeah, I'm still working through the process.
Yeah, and it feels, there is actually like scientific evidence about this where you get a dopamine hit when you talk about a thing that you want to do. You get the same kind of dopamine hit that you get when you're like, you have actually done it. So I think in the film industry, especially, and in the creative world in general, it's really like satisfying and fun to be like, yeah, I'm like writing a script right now, or I'm, you know, talking with this other producer or something like that, or yeah, like I met this actor and they're interested and maybe, and it's like you get so high off of those kind of like silly little ego focused conversations that you get satisfied from them to the point where this end goal that's 8 years down the road is no longer the thing that's driving you. And I don't know, like this is just, film industry aside, like this is just a thing in life that is like fascinating. Like if you, it's almost like you can't verbalize your goals because then it loses the sheen or something. It's like you have to keep it secret until you've done it or something, or else you're gonna like psychologically it'll kind of like dissolve. I don't know. Have you had that experience?
Oh yeah, I buy into that all the time. I don't talk about anything that I'm doing usually. You were actually the first person I actually talked about doing something like that with. I think Justin and I might have talked about it. I don't know if it was on air though, but normally I don't talk about, I don't even tell people I do a podcast. I think you have to just keep everything locked and then let the results speak for themselves when and if you get there. But talking about it or saying, oh yeah, this is my plan and laying it out there, that doesn't do anything.
It's so odd. Yeah, it's true. And I'm definitely a victim of that for sure. And I think in the creative industries especially, it makes, and because filmmaking is so hard to do, that it's like easier to just maybe like talk about doing it rather than doing it. So I don't know the answer. It's very complicated.
It's a trap that you can slip into. Instead of doing the actual thing, you just talk about doing the thing, and then you get the little ego boost from people saying, oh wow, you're doing that,
and you're like,
oh,
okay,
that's cool.
I guess I don't have to do it, and that made me feel good enough. It's like
I could just talk about it.
Weird.
Have you come across a lot of that working in this producer role where people come to you and say, hey, I've got this thing, and then you're like, great, let's maybe talk about it, and then nothing comes from that because they haven't followed through?
It happens a lot, I think, more so because it's emerging filmmakers that don't realize how much
the work is.
And a lot of the bad work is in the hands of a producer. It's not the fun job. Like, you're the one that finds the money. You're the one that hires everybody. You're the one that organizes everything. You're the one responsible if shit totally hits the fan. And so as a producer and having someone come to me that I feel might not be like completely clear on their direction with things, either they're like a writer or director, and they like, I need to be so sure that
they're serious.
Yeah, because I'm not going to put years of my life into something that maybe the people that I'm working with are not 100% on. Like it's crazy how close you get with people that you're working with as a producer. Like the producer-director relationship and relationship with the crew that comes on for a short period of time as you're working through things, it's like nothing I've experienced before. And I think that's what keeps me wanting to work in this industry. As much as I shit on it, the beauty of coming together with people in such a like raw, intense way. Like you can go from getting like the best shot you've ever seen in your life to like 1,000 things falling through for like the next day's shoot in like a 10-minute span of time. And you are, it's almost that, what do they call it in the army when you're like trauma bonding? There's a beautiful trauma bond that happens in the film industry that I really still can't get enough of. And I haven't found that in any other industry. Yeah.
You're almost going from one addictive state to the next, right? You're just living in this heightened state of
It's
emotion.
pretty bananas. And I actually have noticed that there are a lot of people with addiction like pasts that get into this industry, especially people that work in crew, because they're working really intense, long, like late hours. And there's just like a certain breed of person that's able to do it. I can't do it. That's why I'm a producer. Like I can pop on to set and be like, great, I'm going to bed now. Like I don't really have to like be there like start to finish all the time. But the, you know, like gaffers and stuff, like it's bananas what they're capable of and how hard they have to work. Yeah.
So, how would you describe the overall role of a producer? You're getting the money, you're interacting with the director and the crew, you're kind of just steering the outer portion of the ship while the director kind of controls what's going on camera.
Yeah, I like to think of it as a producer is the person that is able to bring the director's vision to life. I also feel that it depends on who you are. Like I feel like I have a really creative bend to the work that I do, and I'm not just sort of like a client-based producer. I'm not going to be like, okay, I'll make this and like see you later. I will be like, this shot is awful. Like you need to cut it. Like I'm pretty heavy-handed with that, and most good producers do that. Like there's also, you know, if you go back, this doesn't happen so much anymore, but other like classic films, you'll hear of like a producer's cut on some things. So I think that the role of the producer can kind of ebb and flow depending on the relationship that you have with the director. But yeah, in a kind of a more traditional sense, it's like you get the money, you organize the people, you kind of are the hands for the brain of the director as well. So they're like, I need this exact kind of person for this thing. And you're like, okay, I'm going to work with the casting director to get that person for you. You know, like you're just getting every single duck in a row for them. And you want them to walk on set, like when they're shooting, and everything is just like perfectly ready for them to like walk on and do their job. That is the goal. And this is obviously for like narrative stuff, which requires like a bigger crew. That's not something that I'm interested in doing so much anymore. And I think that that's probably also why I'm like moving more towards producing documentaries, is because I think the producer has a very different role in the documentary sphere. You'll see kind of like when you're watching a doc, and then it'll be like the person interviewing will say something, you see, and then it's like producer. And you're like, oh, okay. Like the producer is a lot of the time the one interviewing people, which I think folks are kind of surprised by. Like the director kind of takes like a bit of a equal role to the producer in terms of the creative in documentary. This is at least in my experience. And I think I kind of like that. I think I'm someone that is kind of like a repressed creative. Like I've always taken on roles where I'm like supporting creative people, because then they can take the hit if it like sucks or something. But then I'm like scheming behind the scenes to be like, do it like this, do it like this. It's like I don't know what that is.
Repressed creative is an interesting way to phrase it.
I don't know. It's almost like a spineless thing to do in a way, because I'm like, if it sucks, then like I don't have to take the hit. But if it's really good, I'll be like, oh yeah, like
I did that.
Yeah, like it's kind of shitty, but
Does that stem from you not wanting to be on camera, or is it you like the control of kind of shaping it behind the scenes?
I really love the behind the scenes. Like I am the faculty advisor for the Humboldt International Film Festival. That's my role at Cal Poly. And it's a student-run film festival. It's the longest-running student-run film festival in the world. And it is a wonderful, beautiful thing. And I feel so lucky to be part of it. And as the faculty advisor, it's kind of what you'd expect. Like I see my students like, you know, getting stuff together, and I'll just be like, what about this? What about this? And like, luckily they listen to me, and so I can like help to shape it in very like hands-off ways. And it's so satisfying sitting in the theater when the festival is happening and having my student co-directors go in front of all these people and like, you know, announce it and talk about it and stuff. And I'm just, nobody knows who I am really even still. So I'm just like hiding in the corner being like, yes. Like,
It's all coming
get a kick out of
together.
it. Yeah. And I think that's just probably insecurity, like not wanting to be the center of attention, but wanting to like really be a part of something. So
That's probably a healthier way to go about it, though, than the person who is self-obsessed in some way and needs to fill that void by being the center of attention.
could be. I feel like it's a, like a safety blanket thing that I do. I'm not quite sure where that comes from, but I enjoy it.
Are you a pretty outgoing person in your day-to-day life?
Yeah. I think so.
I mean, you're doing a podcast with a stranger you just met 10 minutes ago, so.
Yeah. I'm a Gemini though, so it's like I'm
I don't know what that means. People always say,
Okay.
oh, I'm X, Y, Z. And I'm like, okay, I guess.
so Gemini, it's like the two things. So I can like, yeah, walk in a room and like be super outgoing and then like 20 minutes later be like, I need out right now and I don't want to talk to a single other person. Like it's very kind of like flip-floppy is the thing. Do you know what yours is?
Yeah, I'm a Scorpio.
Oh shit.
But that sounds like me. I could slip into that sometimes where you can go, it's almost like a switch that gets flipped off where you're super
well, because
outgoing.
you're a Scorpio and you're like
Oh, is that fall into the same
you're
thing?
like kind of manipulative, so you're like, okay, maybe I should like spin this way in order to like get this reaction, or maybe I should spin it this way. Like, and yes, of course, it's a totally human thing to be like bopping back and forth. But what day is your birthday? It's
The
coming
7th.
up.
Yeah, of November.
I don't know. My partner is a Scorpio also. I can't say a bad thing about Scorpios, but like complexities abound. Yes.
Yeah, the whole astrology thing I think is a little over my head still. That's a realm I have yet to really dive into.
I like to think of it as actually an astrologer told me this once because I used to get readings all the time. He actually told me that I should move to California, my astrologer, based on my chart. But he said you have to think of it like a weather forecast. So like if it's raining outside, I'm not going to like leave the house without an umbrella. Like you just have to look at the weather to know, right? Like, or if the weather forecast says it's going to rain, is what I mean. Same thing with astrology. If it's like, okay, it's Mercury is in retrograde, there's like a full moon, and you're about to like sign like divorce papers or something, like just don't. Just wait until Mercury's out of retrograde. Like this is common sense. Like look at the weather. That's how I see astrology. So it's not that woo-woo. Like really think about the moon. Think about the tides down the street. Does the moon not dictate those guys? So I think the moon's powerful enough to do a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
for
I
the
don't know
rest of the
how
planets.
woo-woo or not it is. I think the problem is you have woo-woo people in everything that almost ruin the group. Because you have some people that are super far into it, like, oh, you can't, it's a full moon tonight, so you shouldn't leave your house or something. And it's like, oh, okay, well, you're probably okay leaving your house. It's just the fringe people that take it to the extreme.
Yeah. I don't want to get into that. I don't wanna get into identity politics or anything.
Do you like to say pretty agnostic?
Yeah, on a podcast. I would
Probably a
say
good
yes,
call.
I would.
I do not buy into that. I pretty much dive into everything. And then if you put
Yeah.
your foot in your mouth, well,
Yeah, I don't
it's
want
always
to do
another
that.
podcast.
I don't want to do that with you
Yeah.
today, so we can move on.
This idea that you're kind of redirecting more towards documentary style.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a ton of stories you could tell in this area. That is almost like a pretty solid fit for you then.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas? You want to pitch me something?
To pitch you, no. Where I'm at is more, I like the idea of short films right now. But documentaries, I love a good documentary. I think everybody
Yeah.
does.
You could do a short documentary.
I don't know what I would do a documentary about. What do you have any ideas that you're kind of sitting on or?
I'm not developing anything right now. I'm finishing. So at the moment, I'm in post-production on a documentary about language revitalization on the Tolowa Dene Nation, which is near Crescent City, it's Smith River area. And that has been it's not that long actually. We started it in like the summer and now we're finishing it. So that's been taking up a lot of my time. And then I also have a short film that was just doing its festival run. It just screened at Fantastic Fest in Austin. And that is hopefully going to be at a few more festivals. So I've been kind of focusing on that one too. So it's nice because I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, like
You're ready for something.
Ready for something, but in a way where I'm like, I want to like think about thinking about something. Like it's very slow. And that's okay because I've got other stuff going on. But it's nice to just like play with ideas. My partner and I also got a grant from the Canada Council for the Arts. Bless Canada for having grants. To develop a documentary about plant communication, so how plants communicate with each other, and through many lenses. And we talked to a ton of people, like from scientists to like traditional knowledge keepers, about this like general topic. But we've sort of taken that and put it on the back burner, and that's okay. I think that ideas need to sort of percolate and sit and develop or not. And I think that's the other great thing about a documentary. You can think about something and sort of like do the research, but it's different from writing, you know, like 100-page script and being like, oh, that's actually not a great idea. Like,
And then you've invested X amount of hours into it.
yeah. So I think I just need to be open to the area and like listen to people. I think there's a ton of people that I haven't met yet and stories I haven't heard yet. So I'm just like waiting. I did hear though, and I don't know the details about this. He lives around here in Myrtletown. There's a guy that has like many dozens of guinea pigs.
I've not heard about this.
Yes, I don't know the details, but I'm kind of like interested in learning more about it.
Does he breed them or he just has
I don't know.
a little army?
I don't know. This is a mystery. So like if anyone out there
He's
has a
hiding
guinea pig
out.
lead, like I'm interested.
How do you pick a project when it comes to you?
Well, up until recently, I was running my company, Kino Sum Productions, with two others, and the three of us would kind of like vet things to get, like it would be kind of like okay, like here's some ideas. And a lot of the time as a producer, it would be like one of my other two collaborators being like, I want to direct this, like let's do it. And me being just like, I'm here to support you. And so it was more just like them as people of just being like, yeah, like I just want to support what you're doing, like rather than being like, oh, I don't like that idea, or like I just kind of had faith that they would make it great. So I've made very random things. Like I made a documentary for broadcast about the orphan oil well crisis in the Canadian prairies. And then I've also made a documentary also for broadcast about the effects of World War II on Japanese gardens in Western Canada. So I'm kind of all over the place. And now that I've left this company, I feel more sort of like, okay, no, like now you can like fully come up with your ideas. It's sort of what I was saying before about like hiding in the shadows. People would come, like my collaborators would be like, let's do this. And I'd be like, sure, okay. But now as like a solo person, I'm like, okay, like I guess if I want to do something, I can do it. And I just finished the one that screened, the short documentary that screened at Fantastic Fest recently is called The 200 Phenomena of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And it is like a super weird experimental documentary about a collection of short stories that was found in a notebook on a university campus in Calgary, where I'm from. And it ended up getting posted to 4chan. And this was in like 2009, before 4chan was like a bad place. And it kind of proliferated online from there. And it developed this like kind of like mystical folklore thing online in sort of like a creepypasta way. And I found out about these and we like went on this whole journey, and because they were such like weird things that existed only in the online space, we took like a very unconventional approach to the documentary. And that to me was sort of my first I directed this, so this was not as a producer, and this is now the bug that I've caught is like, okay, now I have full creative control. Like now I know what it's like to be in the director's seat as well as the producer's seat, and now I'm like, okay, I just want to keep doing like wacky, weird things, because I think that there's such a gap in the documentary sphere for experimental stuff. Like it's very easy to just watch a documentary, you're interviewing someone, whatever, talking heads, cut to B-roll, no problem. What about like these more abstract approaches to things that are, yes, it's like true documentary, but it's like super surrealist and like out there. And I think the world needs more of that, and that's what I want to be doing. So even if it is like, I mean, the guinea pig thing, it wouldn't be the guinea pig thing with just like me talking to the guy with guinea pigs. Like it'd be like something very kind of like abstract and conceptual.
Less straightforward than that talking head B-roll kind of path.
That's what that's what really gets me going right now.
Yeah, there's definitely an opening in that market, right? Because the talking head B-roll is just, it's everywhere. Everybody does that.
Yeah, and I think people expect that. You know, I don't think that any of the work that I will ever make will be on something like Netflix, and that's not what I want. So,
But you do have one out on Prime Video.
oh yeah, I do. Thanks for the plug.
Subtle little plug for that.
That is a narrative film, events transpiring before, during, and after a high school basketball game. And that's like a lovely little like dark comedy that we did with Andrew Fung from Kim's Convenience. And I think having that name, especially because he's becoming more popular in the US, we were able to get some really great attention. And Andrew is local to Calgary, and he's like friends of friends, and was just so stoked to be part of the project that I think we really lucked out having that like extra leverage for us. But yeah, you never know what people are going to take. And that came with having a distributor come on and kind of manage that from there. If you don't have a distributor come on for your indie film, you will never get your film even on Amazon. Like it's all just kind of awful.
Do you take that into account when you're looking at a project? Is the scope of how big it could get?
Yeah, and it's funny because I think that I'm in a place right now where I don't want to do something big. Like I don't have the mental capacity to take that on. But I think it's like anything. You, again, also talking about the industry as this big thing and how it's not that. It's like every individual film is so different. Like you have to really recognize your audience and like the scope and what it is in order to know where it's going to land. And I think having a background, I have a background in marketing, and that is really, really helpful for that kind of like distribution phase of films and being realistic about where it's going to go. And even if you screen at like really good festivals, it's just so hard these days to get anywhere that has like commercial success with your film unless it's like actually commissioned by a streaming service. Netflix doesn't just like take finished films anymore. They commission the work. Of course they do, because they've got the analytics to show this exact thing is going to perform well. So I'm going to make this exact thing. Like we need a romantic comedy with like this. We need like all that stuff. And so they just like plug it in. They're not going to go get it from somewhere else. And yeah, it sucks. And I think that again, to be especially an independent filmmaker at this point in time, you are kind of insane and kind of like kidding yourself if you think that you're going to make it. But then people do, and it's this, like, it's like, yeah, but like there's always this like, but maybe. But yeah, it's a tough. I think that I'm making peace with knowing that I want to make things in my community for my community at the moment, at least, and that's okay. And that I do have the potential to like really like shoot for the stars if I wanted to, but you have to be like so dedicated to the work that you're doing. Like, so when that comes across my desk, then I will maybe do it. I don't know.
It's almost sad that we're in that state of movie production where you're just doing this plug and play format. of, okay, this is going to work. We don't want to take any risks.
Yep.
And see and create something that's maybe hasn't been done or is a little more out there because we don't know if we're going to flop. So we invest all this money into it and then it doesn't pan out. Whereas if we do this rom-com that we know if we can get 2 A-list celebrities, it's going to do this amount and we'll be okay.
Yeah.
Let's just do that.
It's really, truly, like, that is something that I'm, like, makes me not want to be in the industry. It's just, like, seeing kind of that big high-level stuff and being like, you're fucked. Like, and even if you... I have this feeling, and I don't know these people that work on these, like, really big shows, that they kind of know that they're doing it for the algorithm, you know? Like, they're doing it because this is what's going to perform well. Like, yeah, they're making millions, so I'm sure they're fine. But, like, I just wonder as artists if they're just like, what am I doing? I would rather be making, like, a thing in my basement that I deeply care about. I don't know. I'd like to think you can have money and the, like, creative passion, but it just, I don't know. I haven't met anyone that does both.
The question is whether or not they have that when they start out and it just gets beaten out of you through going in that process, or you just, that's how you develop, is you have to develop into that to fit the mold to actually get into those positions.
I think it has a lot to do with integrity as people. Like, any job that we take on, you have to really think about what it means and deeply care. Like, if you don't deeply care about something, you shouldn't do it. But easier said than done, especially when there's a ton of money attached to something. Like, you can't tell me tomorrow if someone was like, hey, let's, like, hi, it's Spotify, like, let's do this podcast, like, I'll pay you this much, right? Like, but here's all of this, like, you know, red tape or, like, small print with things. Like, you'd probably still do it.
I wouldn't, but that's because I'm a little dumb. But I wouldn't hold it against people that do. And I think the only reason I wouldn't is because I've gone too far with this now, that to hand over any semblance of control or have any semblance of censorship.
If someone was like, here's many millions, I don't know. You'd be shocked at what people
If
do.
I was living in a basement and, you know, couldn't afford to eat that night, yeah, I would sign on the dotted line, but I'm not there yet. And so in this position, I mean, it's hard to say what you would do when you're not actually in that position, but I couldn't do it because there's too much. I have complete control with this. I could say whatever right now. You could say whatever, and it's still going out. It's just.
And I think it takes. It's good that you're seeing that now, because I think it takes that going away for people to realize how much they cared about that, you know. And again, maybe it isn't so wrapped up in money as I think it is, but
it definitely is to some extent.
Yeah.
I mean, money is a strong motivator. You could say if somebody offered you X amount of money to be in this film, but they take over your socials, they take over everything, then I would struggle with, because then you're still giving up this freedom, but you're also getting something that you want out of it. I don't know. That world is so interesting because you lose so much, but you gain a lot in the process. So yeah, especially if you're fitting this specific mold of movie making, you're not maybe making what you would actually want to make and taking the risks and trying to create something that is up to your vision, but you're also making movies that a lot of people are going to watch. They're probably going to enjoy. I would imagine that's gratifying, and you're making a lot of money doing it. But are you losing a piece of your soul in that process is the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we exist in a environment where we're all kind of oppressed in some ways, just living in such a, you know, capitalist money focused sort of environment where we kind of have to participate, whether we like it or not. And whether that's like, oh yeah, I'll just like work a couple days a week and just get by, it's like no big deal, or I'll like hustle super hard and make a ton or whatever. We're all kind of like complicit in this structure that we have built for ourselves, and it's flawed, but it is also sometimes good. Like, I don't really know. Yeah.
I kind of believe you have to participate until you don't, and the goal is getting to the point where you don't. And so maybe that translates to you working, 80 hours a week to try to get to the spot where you can say, no, I don't want to do this. And you have the fuck you money to kind of back that up. But do you want to work 80 hours a week? Is that something you want to sacrifice to get to that spot? And most people don't get to that spot. That's the crazy part, is you could try to do everything right and still have some form of cancer that just bleeds you bankrupt, and then you're screwed.
Yeah,
and you have
especially
cancer.
here. Yes.
Yeah.
USA, baby. I don't know. Yeah,
Gotta love the healthcare system.
Yeah, like I don't know. That's kind of the American way. Is just like fucking go until you drop. And like, I don't think that my current work situation is particularly difficult, but I do see like people grind in this country more than at least where I'm from in Canada, and it's interesting. That's just like another, like I said at the beginning, it's like these little tiny differences, and it's like you're working like over 40 hours a week rather than like 35 or 30, like just small difference. You don't think it would even really make a difference, but it's just enough to be like, damn, like, yeah.
What do you think that is?
The difference between
the difference in mindsets between the two countries. I think we're just a little crazier over here.
No, it's politics, and it's socialism versus like
capitalism.
Really. So, but Canada is flawed too. Like there's all kinds of issues there, but I do see from like a labor perspective there are differences that I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that. Like, and in a way I'm like, damn, like good job, America. Like you're grinding, like you're doing it. But I also see a lot of health issues here, and these are health issues that come from like chronic stress and overworking and lack of preventative care. So it's like, oh man, like, okay, there's a flip side to everything. And again, back to the film industry, it's like that's like times 100. Like I know people that have been hospitalized like several times just
from overworking.
From overworking.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Part of me, I'll be honest, absolutely fetishizes this idea of just working and putting your nose to the grindstone, keeping your head down, and just doing the work.
That's
as hard as you can for as long as you can.
Because you've been told that that's like that's the American dream. That's
like, what it takes.
Yeah, and you put your head and you just go, and then what? There's like a pot of gold at the end of the like rainbow, and you're gonna get it eventually.
But what if you don't?
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Yeah,
I mean, I can say that and embody that now, but if you asked me in 30 years and I was still in a position where I'm struggling, I might be a little more remorseful about those missed moments, those opportunities that I didn't take because I was working.
Yeah. I don't know, this stuff probably is like on Instagram or something. I don't know where I've heard this, but like interviews with seniors and across the board, the big piece of advice that they have at the end of their lives is, I wish I had worked less. Like pretty consistently. I wish I'd worked less and spent more time with my friends and family. So, like, I mean, these people have been through it. They know, like, we should be listening to them. Like, I think that's, like, it makes sense, But on a day-to-day, it's like, no, but I have to. Like, today, I only work half days on Friday, but I worked more than that. And then I worked immediately on the documentary I'm trying to finish. And then I came directly here. And, like, Fridays are supposed to be my chill day. But then there is, like, I get what you're saying with, like, I want to just put my head down and work, because there is this, like, I think it is just, like, it's feeding that, like, anxiety, and it's feeding that like, ego or something, because I'm noticing this with myself. You start doing it, and then you do it even more, and you do it even more. And I'm noticing it because I spent the whole summer, like, not really doing anything and then just launching in to heavy work, and instead of it just being like, okay, I'm working now, it's like, no, like line go up, like line is
ramped
always
up.
going up, and do not want that. Like, that is like against like my value system. And it's I think that it's something that's very like chemical in the human body that's like must
Do more.
do more. It's like we're running away from something. I don't know, it's very weird. I'm really trying to keep that in check.
Do you think that you can almost use that as a source of inspiration depending on the type of work that you're doing? Do you think these people that they talk to and they said, yeah, you should spend more time with your family, do you think they were spending their working years doing something that they were really passionate about, or just working some job that maybe they didn't really like, but it paid well, and so they got that trade-off? I'm going to put in a lot of work so I can make money, but I'm sacrificing my time. As opposed to if you were in that position and I said, here's $10 million, spend the next 5 years creating the project you really want to create, and you're working 100 hours a week, but it's towards something that you're incredibly passionate about.
This is a complicated question. There's many layers to this. One, these seniors that we're talking about, yes, they worked in a generation that like they did not have like fun, passionate jobs. However, I want to understand what you think passion is and say, okay, is this podcast a passion for you? Like, this is it. This is like your passion project.
Yeah, I don't think it would be sustainable if it wasn't. The amount of work that goes into it, I don't think I could do if there wasn't something there that I felt I had to do.
Okay, but this is not your day job. So if it was, like, if you're doing what you said as like, okay, you're going to do this for like many, many hours, how do you think you're going to feel about your podcast? Like,
If this was my day job, if I was like making a sustainable living off
like
doing this,
years, like this is like it that you do.
this was the only thing I could do. Or what do you say?
Yeah, like it's like, okay, this is your passion, go do it. But like this is it, like do it every day. Do you think that, I guess what I'm saying is like, would that like shine wear off pretty quick? Or do you think that that's like, no, this is my passion, of course it wouldn't. This is like,
I'm thinking I would do this even harder than I am, which is kind of upsetting me right now, because that means I'm going back to that. Oh, that means I have more work I should be doing. I should be doing more podcasts in a week. I should be editing more in my spare time. But I think I would ramp it up more if this proved, because I'm still in that awkward spot where you're very much teetering on the edge of, is this something, is it not something? But you almost have to separate yourself from that to just do the work, because if you start thinking about it too long, you're going to think, well, why invest time and not get anything back? So you just keep your head down, and then you have momentary glimpses of, okay, where am I at now?
Yeah.
And then you go back in. But no, I think I would do more. I would do more, which is telling me I need to do more.
Well, it's funny. Like, would you at a certain point, like someone walking into the studio, sitting down, would you just be like, oh my God, like I have to do this again? Like,
no, because I would never let
gonna...
it be that kind of conversation. If it was a guest that I wasn't completely excited about talking to, I wouldn't do it. And that has been a recent lesson that I've learned. I've had to cancel some podcasts because I realized, oh, this is not, I don't want to do this one. And this is not, I don't think it's not going to be enjoyable, or you get a weird vibe and it's just, okay, I don't want to do this, so I'm not going to do this because I don't want to ruin what it is.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is, in my opinion,
you might lose some of the shine.
The shine, and that's, I think, how I'm feeling about working in film. To go back to it, it's, I want to like build up my passion again. It's like a slingshot for me. Like, I'm not a person that is like, choose your one passion and do that forever. Like, I've never ever felt that way. And I think that the one thing that really gets me going, like regardless of what it is that I'm doing, is just like bringing people together and building something as a team that we all care about. And so it takes some time to like step back and wait and have it come, and then that's sort of like the slingshot, and then you go and then you stop. I don't think that maybe this is a personality thing. Maybe other people are like this, but I can't imagine someone being like, oh, this like guitar is my passion. And like, if you were like, okay, you can do that forever, all the time, every day, like that sounds like hell to me. Like I would not want to do that. But I think it's just a personality thing, maybe. I don't know. No hate to people that like do that.
Well, there's definitely the aspect where your thing that is the source of so much love can become the source of hatred, where you just, especially in trying to monetize something, you can lose that if it starts out as a passion or something you just do on the side because it just makes you happy, and then it turns into this thing that you've monetized and now you're doing it because you have to get the paycheck. It can kind of change what it means to you.
Yeah.
That definitely happens to people.
Yeah. And I think passion is such a loaded word for me. As someone that's like been kind of a generalist always and been like a dabbler always and being asked so much of like, well, what's your passion? Like, as though like there's a problem in your life and it's like, if you just like identify this one thing and like go for this like one granular thing, then you're going to be like feel better. Like I've always felt kind of, it's the same thing, like this is controversial, but it's the same thing as people being like, but are you happy? As long as you're happy. And to me, those words are just so like one dimensional. And I guess it also comes back to what we were talking about with the forest, you know? There's always bad, like there's always darkness, and that's okay. Like I think this is a very Western approach to just living and working in general of like, well, as long as you're happy, it's gonna be okay. It's never gonna be like that, and if that's the carrot that you're chasing, you're gonna be miserable forever. And so I'm really like a fan of seeing the nuance to things, and seeing kind of like the darkness to things, but in like a good way. Like that is like a nice, like the darkness is there to sort of like bounce the good off of it, you know? So.
Yeah, I think people have definitely been lied to in this idea that you should be happy all the time. And that if you're not happy 24/7, something is really wrong and you need to change what you're doing. You're gonna have your ups and downs.
Yeah.
I think the question is, maybe are you happy enough? Are you happy enough with what you're doing? Because if you're more miserable for a longer period of time than you are happy, then maybe something's wrong. If you're spending 90% of your time just hating life, that might be pause for concern.
And it usually has nothing to do with the work that you do.
A lot of the times it's just your internal state.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Do you think about that a lot as you're kind of shifting into this new place in life, I guess you would say, of trying to figure out the balance that you want to kind of carve out for yourself?
For sure. I think that it's funny because I keep being like, I'm new here. I've been here for 2 years. I'm not new here, but I think that, like I said, it's been such a slow burn for me, and it's an opportunity for me to really step back and be intentional about like how I am in the world. Like when you move to somewhere new, it's kind of like a blank slate and you can start fresh. So yeah, I think that the moves that I make, it's like, okay, well, this is in front of me and I'm making this move, but like, how am I going to do it in a mindful way and with integrity, even if it's not something that I'm like super into? Yeah, I think that we always have to just like reassess as we go. And it's a favor that you're doing not just to yourself, but to the people around you. Like, it's not about being happy. It's about being, I guess, satisfied, or what would another word be? I hate the word happy, and I feel bad saying that because I feel like an asshole, but content feels a lot more grounded and natural to me, and you can find that and that is so much grounded in the moment, and you could be in any kind of situation and you just have to sort of like check back in with yourself and visit what it is that you need to just feel like you're there. And to your point about like putting your head down and working, and also how the film industry is very much like that. I am constantly trying to fight against it, but I am also constantly aware of how conditioned I am to be like that. We're all conditioned to be like that. And I think it takes a lot of work to sort of like step back in your everyday grind that we're doing and just rethink your internal state. It doesn't mean you have to like go quit your job and live in the woods. It means you just need to like take a moment to reframe how you are internally. I don't know.
Yeah, that idea of happiness, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. I don't think people should chase happiness. I think, or at least for speaking for me, I think if an idea that I've been working with a lot lately is chasing a state of peace and just trying to be at peace in every situation that you find yourself in, rather than trying to be happy all the times, because being happy, you're in a stimulated state, and that is taxing to you. You just want to be at peace. You want to be able to sit with yourself alone in a room and not spiral out of control. And I think a lot of people, myself included, you sit in that room and you start spiraling, and then it almost maliciously feeds back into the sense that I have to go back to work because I can't sit still.
Yes.
So I'm going to work more.
I'm very in that state usually, and I'm trying so hard to step out of it. And it's funny too. So my partner is on sabbatical at the moment. And he's also like a very steady person, like extremely calm. And I am very up and down. And it's having that kind of energy in your life, and that, you know, he's doing like just odd jobs around the house and just chilling. It's like, it's a wonderful opportunity for me to be like, okay, like I need to kind of like regulate myself a bit more to like meet this person where they are, because that's our natural state is just this like bananas thing. And you see someone that's like literally not working their day job anymore, and it's crazy how calm and like, I don't know, chill your life becomes. I'm like, we should just, I guess what I'm trying to say with this whole podcast is like, we should all not be working. Wage labor is bullshit. But yeah, I don't know where I'm going with it.
Do you think you would be where you are now if you didn't have that kind of demon inside of you pushing you to work that way, though?
No, like I said, you can't exist in this little thing that are this human ant hive thing anthill has created. Like,
well, you can exist. The question is, in what state you're going to exist. Are you going to be the homeless person, or the person camping out in the woods? Or are you going to be the person in the $500 million penthouse overlooking Central Park?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to respond to it. Again, it goes back to your internal state, because you could be miserable living in the woods, or you could be like super stoked about it. Like, I think that we are all like, oh my God, think of the world like it is at the moment. Like, everything is completely fucked right now. And so for us to be sitting here being like, I don't know, maybe I'll do this, or like, life is hard, and like, oh, what is it that we're doing? It is like, we are so lucky to be in the position that we're in, and it really is about reframing your consciousness rather than reframing your like physical surroundings, because all of us are like so privileged to be kind of in the place that we're in and be healthy. And yeah,
it's hard to internalize that, though.
Yeah,
it's one thing to say it.
Absolutely. It's easy to say, and it is so hard to do. And I think that, again, it's just a case of like constantly reminding yourself. Like, it's kind of like if you have like, say you have like bad posture or something, and you like, your chiropractor is like, you gotta just stand this kind of way. You can't just like stand that kind of way and just do it. You have to remind yourself all the time for months and months and months. And then you kind of do fix it. And it's like, oh man, okay, it's just this like constant reminding. And I don't know. Part of me is like, we are who we are, and we gotta just like do our thing. But then part of me is like, the human brain can like train itself to do all kinds of amazing stuff that is like very good in the long run. Maybe like not so fun in the moment, but like, yeah, that is the journey that I'm on. We're all kind of on that journey of trying to figure that out.
It's a good journey to be on.
Yeah.
It's far better than the alternative of just being miserable and accepting that is life. You just exist in this miserable state. And
Yeah.
this is all it's going to be.
Yeah. Which,
Those are the people I can't stand. If you're unhappy and you just think this is how life is for me, I just am miserable all day, every day, and nothing's going to change.
Yeah. It's fun to go there though sometimes.
It's easy to go there.
Yeah.
It's definitely easy to slip into that woe was me mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And the world is crumbling around me.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to change that.
Yeah, I think it takes, and then again, like I think that I'm someone that sort of like revels in the darkness, but I think it takes like dipping into that to come back out in a bigger way. So I'm very, I think, not steady in that regard. Like I like to go down and then up again, for better or worse.
You like to stare into the abyss.
Yeah, because then you're like, you see what's all the way down here, and then you can also see what's all the way up here. So it's about like having breadth as a human.
Do you think that's just a creative person in general? Is you have that darkness kind of tucked away? Do you think that's just
No,
people in general?
That's people. And again, I think it's a very like Western thing to stay within this small thresholds. And I think that as humans, we have like way more capacity than that, and we shouldn't be scared of it. Yeah.
People that are afraid to go into that darkness, I think that's where a lot of problems come from. Because the only way to confront that side of you is to take a trip down there. The problem is not everybody comes back from that trip. Some people get
It's
lost.
a hole. Yeah, I've definitely been there where you're just like, oh, I've dug myself into this hole, and now the hole is like way, like, how?
How do I get out?
Yeah.
It's interesting hearing that you are taking this kind of pivot towards documentaries, because hearing you talk about this, you sound like someone who would be down the rabbit hole of kind of dark and brooding narrative short films. Of I want something that's a hard hitter that just is incredibly dramatic and just leaves you sitting in your seat when the screen flickers off.
And no, humanity is dark enough as it is.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
We got plenty of stories that exist. I don't know, for me, like, nothing against narratives. I just think that as we are, like, I just want to see and hear stories like as they are. Yeah.
Well, you're right in that you could definitely have after saying that, you could definitely achieve some dark realities that don't have to be fabricated. Just look at the past. You've got a ton.
Yeah. I want to know about the script you're writing.
I can tell you off air. I can tell you. I don't want to put it out on the podcast just yet. But if I tell you,
is it a short or a feature?
It would be a short film. Yeah, I've got the idea. I have the opening scene that I've been sitting on. I just haven't quite figured out how to tie it all up yet. But I can tell you off air. Yeah, you're gonna think, oh, this is dog shit. I'm glad you didn't say this on the podcast.
Can I ask, like, what inspired you to start writing something?
I wanted to act in something, but I wanted to act in something that I like dark shit, and so I wanted something that was powerful and kind of dark. And obviously, being up here, it's not like we're down in LA where you could just go try a bunch of different things. So I thought I would write something, and talking to all of these other people, especially Justin and a couple photographers, it makes you want to create something that you can kind of put out into the world and just say, this is, almost like a labor of love. You just put out there and let it exist.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I feel like a really good thing for folks that are writing is to workshop it with people. Like, I don't know what goes on in Humboldt in terms of like film groups. I know that there's the film commission, but that's like very industry focused. It would be so, and again, this might exist already, but like, wouldn't it be so nice to have like a round table writers group that, you know, you're reading your scripts together and you're going through things. I think that that's when you get some really incredible progress in work, is when you're able to objectively, like, to put your ego aside and get real feedback from people that you respect. So many times I've seen filmmakers, because it's like your magnum opus. It's like, yeah, it's perfect. It's not. It's good. There's going to be things totally wrong with it. And many directors that I've worked with, it's shocking how many blind spots they can have because they're just so dead set on their vision. And it's all stuff that, like, at the end of the day when the film comes out, they're like, oh, I wish I had done this, this, and this. And it's like, what? Like, so many people told you this throughout the process and you wouldn't listen to them. Like, it takes a lot for people to, like, be open to changing their vision because they're really afraid of compromising. And you gotta let people in to the process. You know, this whole idea of this, like, you know, like, writer in the, you know, back of the dark room working by themselves and then releasing it into the world and it's perfect. Like, that's insane. Like, you have to be collaborative with your approach with it, or it's gonna suck. So happy to read your script.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't think that it would be anywhere near perfect, whatever I produced. I would not have that problem.
What is it, can I ask, like, the genre that it's in?
It would be a drama, I think. I think now we're getting, like, way past the level of intensity that I am currently in with it, work-wise. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Working on some ideas. Yeah.
And
well, I'm gonna have to now that we've been talking about it. Now I gotta do something.
Yeah. And I think just, like, enjoy the process. Like, the journey is the destination. There's definitely a thing that happens when you finish a project. Like, if you see it all the way through, there's, like, a mourning period. Like, and I've shared this with a lot of other people that work in film, and they're like, oh yeah, it's totally, like, especially when you're shooting for, like, weeks and weeks with the same group of people, and then you finally wrap everything up, and it's like, what happened? Like, where's my family? And, like, is this really done? And I don't know, again, it's this, like, trauma bond thing where, and it's like, okay, you gotta just, like, enjoy the process because it's over and it's just like, that's it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like moving, right? You build this community, you get pretty close with everyone, and then everybody goes your separate ways.
Yeah. Do
Project's
you find
over.
it, like, as someone that's from here, what is your vibe on, like, the film community in Humboldt? Like, do you, like, I know you've interviewed a few people, but I'm curious if you have kind of like like, if you know a group of people that work on things, like, if there is a community here for that.
I don't know to what degree. I don't think there's a very big community. I know Justin has some guys that he is pretty close with that are also photographers, kind of videographers. I don't think there's any, like, close-knit group where everyone would go and, like, hash out ideas or work through scripts. I don't know that we have that.
It's too bad. So in Canada, I hate being like, well, in Canada, but, like, there is this beautiful thing where there's nonprofit, like, artist-run centers all across the country. And this was something that was put in place in, like, the 70s, I think. Whoever the prime minister was at the time, like, implemented this big national, like, arts, like, influx of arts funding, and it went to, like, building out these centers. And originally it had so much to do with, like, renting gear and having access to, like, the new technology. But now, as technology has sort of progressed so quickly and it's a lot more accessible, these centers have become so much more this hub for networking and coming together to share ideas. And I worked at one of them for 4 years as the communications and programming director. And that's where I kind of got my first footing into the film world. And it is just so, so, so important to have that kind of thing in any city, even something small like here, you know, like the Humboldt County Film Club or something, like just some, you know, we don't even need any like real money to get something like that started, because you've got, you know, Cal Poly Humboldt has a growing film department and with amazing talent coming out of it. Like I'm shocked by some of the work that these students are making, and they come out of it and they're like, well, I want to stay in Humboldt. I love it here, but I don't feel like I can do anything as a filmmaker. And if we were all able to just like really come together in a way that was productive and, you know, just able to share our visions and also be able to share technological stuff. Like, hey, I have a camera you can borrow. Oh, you have sound gear. Great. Like, that is what's going to build the industry here, is just getting people together. And the more that I'm talking to folks, like even just in the past like 6 months, I'm like, oh, like even on your podcast, I'm like, oh, there's other people working in film that you're interviewing. Like, huh, okay. Like there are people here doing it. There's probably a ton. And it's just, you know, coming together to share ideas. It should never feel like it's about competition. This place is too small for that to be like, we need to be working together to build something up. So make it happen. You're like the guy talking to people.
Well, I think that's more your area to start that kind of group. I know Access Humboldt, they provide gear that you can rent, but I don't know if it's how much of that is videography gear. I know they do some lighting. I think they have some
Access Humboldt.
Yeah, it's a community resource. I think their rental fees are pretty cheap. Again, I don't know if it's videography stuff though. I'm not quite sure. I know they have some podcasting stuff and microphones and lights, but I don't know what past that. But I think a lot of it is kind of that mentality of the walled off garden, especially with things like film, where you just create in this box. You don't want to let people in or collaborate, because what if somebody steals your idea or runs off and copies it, and then you're screwed and now you've got nothing.
Yeah, you can't exist in a box in this industry. Like, it takes a village. Yeah.
We could use that village up here. I think that's why a lot of people leave, especially for film, is there's nothing up here.
Yeah.
So we're going to LA.
Have you spent much time in LA? I have not.
I have not. I've gone, you know, trips, a weekend here, a weekend there, but not anything extensive.
I don't think I could hack it. I've been there a few times, not for work.
Hack it lifestyle-wise or professionally?
Yeah, lifestyle-wise. Like, I just think it's like the grind, and the grind is like on crack. Like, it's just a lot.
It's literally on crack down there.
I mean, it's not really literally, but to each their own. I think that, like, I keep saying this, but you can't talk about the industry as one thing. And I just want to fit into like a tiny little branch of it that's kind of vague over on the side at the moment, and that might change. Yeah.
Well, I think that's how bigger parts get built out, right? Is somebody has to say, I'm going to carve out this spot. It's you're almost planting a tree, and then the tree's going to grow and it's going to get bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we'll start a film co-op here.
I think that's what we've decided on this podcast.
It's funny because I hadn't even remotely thought about that until we were talking, and I'm like, that's
not a bad idea.
That is a beautiful thing about being in this place, is that there are enough people to really build something. You know, it's not like we live in Oric, bless Oric, but like but there's not enough people for it to be like, oh no, there's another one of these over here. Like, that's already been done. It's kind of like the perfect environment to start stuff, actually, because you can bet in the next like 10, 20 years, that's not going to be the case. This is sort of like the moment. Like, you've got the people, you've got the energy, but you don't have necessarily like all of that like built up infrastructure. And we have the opportunity to be part of building that. It's really cool. I don't know.
I think that's a great idea.
Great. Let's do it.
We're solving all the world's problems on this podcast now.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can wrap this. We've done hour and a half.
I
We
have
put in some
not
time.
talked this much in like years, so I hope that was passable for
No,
you.
this was great. I'm really appreciative of you coming on. I had a great time talking with you.
Yeah, me too.
Do you want to plug all of your stuff where people can find Kino Sum, your past work?
Yeah, so kinosum.com. I don't run Kino Sum anymore, but they're wonderful and amazing, and they're based out of Calgary. And the short that's in festivals right now, The 200 Phenomena of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, will be, I don't know, when I'm done my festival run, I'll just probably put it on Vimeo at some point. But the feature documentary that I'm just finishing is actually premiering at Cal Poly Humboldt on November 11th at the Native American Forum, and that is called Still We Live On, and it was made with and for the Tolowa Dine Nation. And it's about language revitalization in the community and the work that they're doing to build up their language, and it is an incredible, inspiring documentary, in my opinion. Just the work that they're doing for a community that is so small. It's pretty impressive. So I'm really grateful to be part of that project. Yeah.
And be on the lookout for a project coming out on guinea pigs.
Most likely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I did want to ask, just because it popped into my head, this idea of kind of touring the film circuit and these film festivals. Is that, I know you said it's challenging to get a lot of traction with that, but is that still a viable option for people? If you shoot, say you're in a small community and you shoot something and you get it on the circuit?
100%. 100%. That is, like, if you're talking career-wise, in order to like build up your resume and your reputation as a filmmaker, yeah, that is it. Like, that's your first stop. If you're talking monetarily, even if your film screens at Sundance, like, you still have to get into the right hands for it to actually make a buck. So I think people convolute those two a little bit much. Of like, oh, if it screens at festivals, it's successful.
I've made it. I'm done.
Yeah, but like, hey, I mean, when I get a notification that I got into a festival, like, I'm happy. You know, it's a great feeling, and it's just a great feeling to know that eyes are seeing your film. So if that's the goal, is just to get eyes on it, like, yeah, amazing. Get it into festivals. Just apply for festivals that you have researched and are reputable, because there's like thousands and thousands of them out there that are kind of just a total joke and a racket, so they'll just take your money. So just have a festival strategy.
Are a lot of indie filmmakers going the YouTube route? Is that an avenue they're taking, or it's still predominantly festivals?
Well, again, it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is like, I'm going to be a YouTube influencer and I'm going to make, because you can make a lot of money if you get a lot of eyes on YouTube. Like, and there's no shame in that whatsoever. There's some amazing work coming out on YouTube, but you're not going to have the video that you made for YouTube play in a festival. It's just completely different audiences. Sorry, my phone's going off.
No, that's perfect. That's our sign to wrap here.
But yeah, different audiences, definitely you'll get eyes on YouTube too, so.
Okay, well, thank you. We'll wrap this here.